Every drama eventually comes to an end. And sometimes, when the final episode finishes, you immediately start looking for the next one. But sometimes, you just sit there for a moment. And that's how I felt after Spooky in Love. Because when I first started watching, I thought I was getting a story about ghosts, curses, and a fake relationship. And somewhere along the way, it became a story about something much more human: fear, grief, love, and the courage it takes to reach for something beautiful when you already know how much it could hurt to lose it. Because courage isn't always about being fearless. Sometimes courage is reaching out when you're terrified, or staying when running would be easier, or laughing again after you've been hurt. And sometimes courage is finally allowing yourself to believe that maybe you're allowed to be loved, just like in this drama. But there's another kind of courage too, knowing when to let go. So today we're saying goodbye to Spooky in Love. And before we close the book on this story, I want to sit with it one last time. Not just talk about what happened, but talk about what it meant. So let's pour one last cup. At the beginning of Spooky in Love, Yuri is living inside a world most people can't see. She can see ghosts, and because of the curse surrounding her, physical contact with another person can have devastating consequences. So, something as simple as holding someone's hand isn't so simple for her. It's dangerous. She has to keep her distance from others, build careful boundaries, and try not to let anyone get too close. Then there's the male lead, a prosecutor, someone whose life has nothing to do with ghosts until she enters his world. Their engagement begins as an arrangement, a fake relationship that is supposed to solve practical problems for her. Neither of them is supposed to fall in love, and somewhere along the way, the arrangement starts becoming real. And I think that's the first major shift in their story. The fake relationship stopped being fake long before either of them admitted it. You can see it in the little things: the worrying, the jealousy, the way he starts considering her feelings before his own, and the way she slowly begins allowing him into parts of her life that she normally keeps protected. Then he tells her grandmother that he loves her, and he's nervous. He's clearly terrified, but he says it anyway. And that's what makes the moment work. He isn't making some grand declaration because everything suddenly feels safe. He simply reached a point where pretending not to care is no longer possible. And then comes the proposal, which naturally goes completely wrong. He prepares the ring, he tries to find the perfect moment, and she thinks he's proposing when he's actually tying his shoelace. And finally, when he gets down on one knee, he has acupuncture needles. It's funny, it's awkward, but this is him. And somehow it's perfect because eventually he admits that yes, he really was trying to propose. And then she does something even more meaningful. She proposes to him. She doesn't wait for life to decide what happens next. She chooses. She reaches for him first. And for her, that is big. She's not saying, I'm no longer afraid. She's saying, I'm afraid and I still choose you. And maybe that's what this first step is really about. Not the beginning of the romance, but the moment their relationship changes from something they're pretending to have into something they're deliberately choosing. By episode 9 and 10, they've chosen each other. They're engaged. Their grandmothers meet. And the relationship that began as an arrangement has become a future they're actually planning. But now we get to see what their relationship looks like in the ordinary moments. And that's where I think Spooky in Love is at its sweetest. He doesn't try to erase her circumstances, he remembers them, he adjusts, he pays attention. And then there's Singapore. She goes there to handle things herself, and he follows, not because she can't manage without him, but because he wants to be there. And then we get the gloves. He can't touch her bare skin, so he finds another way. He puts on the gloves and takes her hand. And suddenly something as ordinary as holding hands become an act of devotion because he doesn't ask Yuri to make her life easier for him. He meets her where she is. And then we get one of my favorite little moments. Yuri's cozy space. The cushions, the tent, this tiny warm corner inside her huge home. She has money, she has space, but this is where she feels safe. And he is invited inside. That details feels more intimate than any grand romantic gesture because he's not simply entering her home. He's being invited into the place where she lets her guard down. And then comes a time machine conversation, past or future. He chooses the future. And what does he imagine? He imagines them going to restaurants, movies, travel, parks, ordinary days. He isn't imagining some extraordinary destiny. He's imagining a life with her. Yuri chooses the past. She wants to return to the moment that changed everything. And suddenly their answers reveal something important. He's looking forward. She's still looking back. He wants to imagine everything they could become. She's still trying to understand what happened to her. And neither answer is wrong. He gives Yuri something she hasn't been able to imagine for herself, a future after everything that happened. And she reminds him that moving forward doesn't mean pretending the past didn't matter. And somewhere between those two directions, they find each other. That's the second sip. Not a love that magically fixes everything, but a relationship built through small acts of understanding: a glove, a hand, a quiet room, a shared cup of tea, and the simple decision to show up. And then the story changes because now that they have something beautiful, there is something to lose. The zodiac warning, his grandmother's concern, and suddenly everything they built feels fragile. But the warning itself isn't what breaks them, it's what Yuri does with it. She has spent her life believing that the people around her can be harmed because of her. So when she believes that he's in danger, she doesn't ask him what he wants. She decides for him. She ends the engagement. And that's where the story becomes painful because Yuri believes she's protecting him, but he never asked to be protected from loving her. He already made his choice, and now he's being denied the chance to make it again. That's why his reaction hurts so much. He's not only losing an engagement, he's losing the future he had already begun imagining. Those ordinary things from the time machine conversation suddenly disappear. Yuri's trying to prevent a future loss by creating a loss in the present. And that brings us to one of the hardest questions in the story. Can you love someone without trying to control what happens to them? Because he gets to choose. He gets to decide what risk he's willing to take. He gets to decide what kind of future he wants. She can warn him, she can be afraid, but she cannot make the choice for him. And that's why the necklace, the shaman, and the truth about Yuri's condition matter so much. They reveal how much of her life has been shaped by information she didn't fully understand. She built an entire identity around the idea that she is dangerous to the people she loves. That belief has influenced every relationship she's had, how close she allows people to get, how much happiness she permits herself, and eventually, how she loves him. So, the real change Yuri needs isn't simply learning that the future may be different from what she feared. Maybe it's learning that other people are allowed to choose what they're willing to risk. And sometimes trusting someone means giving them that choice. That's the bitter sip. Sometimes loving someone means stepping back and letting them decide whether they want to stay with you. And maybe this is where Spooky in Love brings everything full circle because underneath the ghosts, the romance, and the laughter, this was also a story about what we carry with us: fear, grief, guilt, memories, and the belief that moving forward means leaving something behind. And no one represents that better than G1 because when he comes back, he doesn't come back to claim Yuri. He doesn't ask her to choose him. He comes back to release her. He tells her to live, to stop carrying him, to stop believing that moving forward means abandoning the past. And I think that's what makes his return so meaningful. He doesn't erase what happened. He gives Yuri permission to stop living inside it. And then something beautiful happens. The ghost Yuri has spent so much of her life helping gives something back to her: warmth, comfort, life. And suddenly the thing Yuri thought was only a curse has also become part of the reason she survived. The ghosts weren't simply something she needed to escape, they became part of her purpose, part of her life, part of who she became. And maybe that's why the ending feels so satisfying. Yuri spent so long asking, why did this happen to me? And by the end, she doesn't need an answer. She has something better, a reason to keep living. And then we come back to the hands. Because if there's one image I'll carry with me from this drama, it's theirs. At the beginning, Yuri can't simply touch someone. Something completely ordinary has become something frightening. So he learns to love her through that boundary, carefully, patiently, without asking her to become someone else. And then he finds a way to hold her hand. He starts to wear gloves. And eventually, they don't have to think about it anymore. They can simply hold hands. And in the final scene, they walk together, hand in hand. For everyone else, that's ordinary. Two people walking home, holding hands, nothing extraordinary. But for them, it's almost a miracle. And now, those same hands are holding the hand of the person she loves most. That's the circle. That's the healing. And the love that Spooky in Love reminds us that miracles don't always have to be extraordinary. Sometimes a miracle is simply being able to hold the hand of the person you love. And maybe that's why the ending stayed with me, because Spooky in Love was never really asking whether love could conquer everything. It was asking something much more human. What if love is worth choosing even when you know you could lose it? The fake relationship stopped being fake long before either of them admitted it. It became real in the little moments, in the staying, in the reaching out, in the gloves, in the awkward proposal, and eventually in the choice to build a future without knowing exactly what tomorrow will bring. Because that's what made the relationship feel so real. It wasn't perfect. Sometimes the proposal went completely wrong. Sometimes the timing was cruel. Sometimes the person who loves you isn't the person you love. And sometimes the thing you're most afraid of losing becomes the very thing that teaches you how to live. And maybe that's the final message Spooky in Love leaves us with. You don't have to know how the story ends to choose how you're going to live it. Sometimes courage is reaching out. Sometimes it's staying. Sometimes it's laughing again. And sometimes it's knowing when to let someone go. So, Spooky in Love, this is my last pour. Thank you for the ghosts, for the laughter, for the awkward proposals, for the gloves, for the little tent, for the tears, for the hands that spent so long being afraid and eventually learned how to hold each other. Thank you for reminding me that healing doesn't always mean forgetting, that moving forward doesn't mean leaving the past behind, and that sometimes the smallest things can feel like miracles. A cup of tea, a hand reaching for yours, someone choosing to stay, someone giving you permission to go. Two people simply walking home together, hand in hand. So this is my goodbye. Not because the story wasn't worth holding on to, but because sometimes the most beautiful thing we can do with a story we love is let it end. One last sip, one last pour, and then we let it go.